Have you ever wondered what secrets lie buried beneath the floors of our oldest museums? Not just artifacts in glass cases, but hidden histories, locked away from public view. This is the story of one such secret, a mystery that began over a century ago and lay dormant, waiting for someone to find the key. That someone was Dr. Elias Ward, a historian whose quiet life was about to be turned upside down. It all started during a routine renovation of the Grand Antiquarian Museum. Deep in the sub-basement, a section that hadn't been touched in decades, a worker's sledgehammer struck something that wasn't supposed to be there. Not pipes, not stone, but a hollow space behind a false wall. Behind it was a small, dusty alcove, and inside, a single, lead-lined chest. The museum staff were baffled. It wasn't on any inventory list, past or present. There were no records of its existence. So, they called in their most trusted expert on the museum's obscure history. Dr. Ward. Alistair Ward was a man who lived and breathed the 19th century. He could tell you the price of bread in London in 1888, or the preferred shade of wallpaper for a Victorian sitting room. When he saw the chest, a thrill ran through him, the kind only a true historian feels when faced with the unknown. The chest was sealed with a complex lock, but it was the inscription on the lid that truly captivated him. A single initial, E, intertwined with a royal cipher he'd only ever seen in textbooks. This was no ordinary storage box. This belonged to someone connected to the royal court. After days of meticulous work, the lock finally clicked open. Inside, nestled in velvet that had long since faded, was a collection of documents. But the centerpiece, the item that drew Ward's eye immediately, was a leather-bound journal. Its pages were filled with elegant, looping handwriting. But it wasn't English. It was a cipher, a complex code of symbols and numbers that seemed to dance across the page, taunting him with its secrets. Tucked inside the journal, its front cover was a faded photograph of a young man with a serious expression and a neatly trimmed mustache. On the back, an M was faintly penciled in. Edmund. Dr. Ward recognized the name instantly. Edmund Croft, a junior aide to a high-ranking member of the royal household. His story was a minor, yet intriguing, footnote in the history books. In the autumn of 1892, Edmund Croft vanished without a trace. He left his rooms one evening, telling his valet he was going for a walk, and was never seen again. The official investigation concluded he had likely met with an unfortunate accident or, assume whispered, had fled the country to escape gambling debts. The case was closed, and Edmund Croft became a ghost, a forgotten man. But now, holding this journal, Dr. Ward knew that was a lie. This sealed archive, hidden away for over 120 years, was Edmund's story, and it was clear someone powerful wanted it to remain untold. Ward dedicated every waking moment to breaking the cipher. He cross-referenced it with known codes of the era, military ciphers, and even personal codes used by diplomats. For weeks, he made no progress. The symbols were unlike anything he'd ever encountered. It was a custom-made code, designed for absolute secrecy. He was beginning to lose hope when he noticed a small, recurring symbol in the journal's Maginatane drawing of a starling. It seemed insignificant, a merry doodle. But then he remembered something from Edmund Croft's file. Croft was an avid bird watcher. It was his only known hobby. Could that be the key? He pulled out an old ornithology guide from 1890. He started to experiment. What if the numbers corresponded to page numbers in the bird guide, and the symbols to the specific species on that page? He tried it. Number 42. Symbol for starling. He turned to page 42 of the guide. The first word of the starling's description was gathering. He jotted it down. The next code on page, on the symbol for raven. The first word was darkness. Slowly, painstakingly, word by word, the message began to emerge from the coded script. It wasn't about gambling debts or a tragic accident. It was something far more sinister. Edmund's journal spoke of secret meetings, shadowed figures in the palace corridors, and a conspiracy that reached the very highest levels of society. He wrote about a clandestine society operating within the aristocracy, one that called itself the Order of the Penumbra. They weren't interested in politics or power in the traditional sense. Their obsession was with ancient artifacts, items believed to hold esoteric and unnatural properties. Edmund had stumbled upon their activities by accident. He had seen them smuggling a strange, pulsating obsidian stone into the palace late one night. His curiosity had gotten the better of him. He started watching them, documenting their movements, their members, their goals. The journal entries grew more frantic, more paranoid. He knew he was in danger. He wrote, "They know I am watching. Their shadows follow my own. I fear I have seen too much." The final entries were chilling. Edmund described how the Order was planning to use the obsidian stone in a ritual, something he called the widening of the veil. He didn't understand what it meant, but he knew it was catastrophic. His last coherent entry was a desperate plea. "I have hidden this record. If you are reading this, it means I have failed. Do not let them complete the ceremony. The artifact must not be awakened. The consequences are beyond comprehension." The very last page contained only 2 words, scribbled hastily. "They're here." And then, nothing. The rest of the journal was blank. Dr. Ward sat back in his chair, the silence of the archives pressing in on him. This was no longer a historical curiosity. Edmund Croft hadn't just disappeared. He'd been silenced. And the secret society he exposed, the Order of the Penumbra, had they simply faded away? Or had they just become better at hiding? He looked at the date of Edmund's last entry. October 30th, 1892. Then he looked at the current date on his calendar. It was October 29th. Suddenly, a cold dread washed over him. The ritual Edmund spoke of, the widening of the veil. What if it was tied to a specific time? An annual event. He realized with a jolt that the artifact Edmund mentioned, the pulsating obsidian stone, sounded terrifyingly familiar. He had seen it just last week. The museum had recently acquired a new, mysterious piece for a special exhibit, a private donation from an anonymous benefactor. It was a large, unearthly black stone, described in the catalog simply as the Midnight Shard. The exhibit was scheduled to open tomorrow night. Halloween Ward's heart hammered in his chest. It couldn't be a coincidence. The hidden journal, the disappearance, the secret society, the artifact. The Detito pointed to one terrifying conclusion. The Order of the Penumbra was still active, and they were about to finish what they started in 1892. He was the only person on Earth who knew the truth. He looked from the 100-year-old journal to the museum's exhibition schedule. The clock was ticking. He had less than 24 hours to stop a century-old conspiracy and prevent a catastrophe he could uneven begin to imagine. Edmund Croft had failed. Dr. Ward knew he could not afford to do the same. What happens next? Does Dr. Ward manage to expose the Order and stop the ritual in time? Or does he suffer the same fate as Edmund Croft? Have you ever felt like you're being watched? Not by a person, but by the past itself. That's how it started for me. My name is Ward, and I restore old audio tapes. It's a quiet job, or at least, it used to be. It all changed the day a man named Alistair Finch vanished. Alistair wasn't just any clerk. He worked at the city's central archive, a place most people forget exists. He was meticulous, quiet, almost invisible. One Tuesday, he just didn't show up for work. No note, no call. His apartment was empty, as if he'd stepped out for milk and never came back. The police were stumped. To them, he was just another missing person in a city full of them. But I knew Alistair. He'd occasionally bring me damaged tapes, oddities from the archive's forgotten corners. He was fascinated by lost sounds, forgotten voices. A week after he disappeared, a package arrived at my studio. No return address. Inside was a shoebox, and inside that, a single, unlabeled reel-to-reel tape, and a small, tarnished silver key. My blood ran cold. I knew, somehow, this was from Alistair. A final delivery. I threaded the tape onto my machine. The hiss was thick, like a sandstorm. Then, a voice emerged, frail and distorted. It was Alistair. He sounded terrified. He spoke of forbidden records, a collection of histories so dangerous, so world-altering, that they were erased. He said he hadn't just been a clerk. He was a guardian. He was part of a secret network of archivists, a hidden order tasked with protecting these truths from those who would use them to control the present. He warned that they were coming for him, that he had to hide the Keystone recording, and then the tape cut out. The Keystone recording. What was it, and who were they? The silver key in the box was my only clue. It didn't look like a door key. It was ornate, with a strange, gear-like pattern at its tip. I spent days trying to figure it out, visiting old lock-hand key shops, searching online forums for antique keys. Nothing. It felt like a dead end. Alistair was gone, and I was left with his ghost on a magnetic strip, driven by a mix of loyalty and a growing sense of dread. I started digging into the city archives history. I went there under the pretense of researching old audio preservation techniques. The place was a labyrinth of paper and dust. I eventually found my way to the oldest section, the sub-basement, a place that was officially sealed off due to structural concerns. But Alistair had mentioned it once. A place where the real archive lived. Using a crowbar and a lot of nerve, I pried open the sealed door. The air that hit me was ancient, smelling of decay and secrets. Down a set of stone steps, I found it. Not just a room, but a network of tunnels, lined with metal shelves holding countless canisters and boxers. This was the underground archive, and in the center of the first chamber was a metal console, a strange, antique-looking machine. On its face was a keyhole that matched the silver key perfectly. I inserted the key and turned. The console hummed to life. Screens flickered on, showing not text, but complex. So it wasn't just storage. It was a catalog, an interface. A map lit up, showing a series of glowing points scattered across the tunnels. These were the forbidden records. Alistair's voice echoed in my head. They erased the voices, but they couldn't erase the echoes. I grabbed the first canister I could reach and brought it back to my studio. The tape inside was brittle, fragile. As I carefully worked to restore it, something strange began to happen. I started hearing things. Not just the static and the pops of the decaying tape, but whispers, faint voices, fragments of conversations, slipping through the hiss. At first, I thought it was auditory pareidolia, my brain making patterns out of noise. But it became clearer. They're listening, one voice whispered. The signal is a lie, said another. These weren't on the tape itself. It was like the process of restoring it was opening some kind of channel. The voices were echoes, ghosts in the machine, and they were talking to me. I worked through more tapes from the hidden archive. Each one was a piece of a puzzle. One held the true account of a famous political scandal, revealing that the official story was a complete fabrication. Another contained the last words of a scientist who discovered a clean energy source right before his lab mysteriously burned down. These weren't just records. They were weapons. The truth, raw and unfiltered. The whispers grew more insistent. They weren't just random fragments anymore. They were warnings. They told me about the Silencers, a shadowy group dedicated to hunting down and destroying these records, and the archivists who protected them. They were the ones who took Alistair. The whispers told me that the Keystone recording Alistair mentioned wasn't a history. It was a key. A sonic frequency that could either expose all the hidden records to the world at once or destroy them forever. One night, as I was restoring a particularly difficult tape, a voice came through, clearer than any before. It was a woman's voice, calm and strong. Ward, she said. My name? I froze, my heart hammering against my ribs. Alistair knew you could be trusted. He chose you. Who are you? I whispered back to the empty room. A fellow guardian, the voice replied, emanating not from my speakers, but from the air around me. One of many. The tapes are more than just recordings. They are conduits. By restoring them, you're attuning yourself to the frequency, to the network of those who listen. She explained that the archivists had learned to embed their own consciousness, their echoes, into the magnetic fields of the archives, as a last resort, a way to guide the next guardian if one of them should fall. Alistair hadn't just left me a tape. He had left me a chorus of ghosts to guide me. They guided me to a hidden compartment in Alistair's old desk at the public archive. Inside was a small, hand-cranked device, and a final, coded note. The whispers helped me decipher it. It was a location, a time, and a sequence. It was the plan to activate the keystone, but it was a trap. The silencers knew someone would follow Alistair's trail. They were waiting. The whispers warned me. They're watching the keystone's location. They expect you to go there. You must create a diversion. My studio was no longer safe. I could feel their presence. A subtle shift in the city's rhythm. Men in dark suits who lingered too long on street corners. Cars that passed my building too many times. Following the ghostly instructions, I packed a bag with my most essential restoration tools and a few of the most critical tapes. I rigged a simple looping broadcast in my studio, a decoy, to make it seem like I was still working. Then, under the cover of darkness, I slipped out. The voices were my compass, guiding me through the city's forgotten alleyways and service tunnels. A world I never knew existed right beneath my feet. My mission is clear now. I'm not just a restorer of tapes anymore. I'm a keeper of voices, a guardian of truth. The silencers are hunting me, but they're not just hunting one man. They're hunting a legion of echoes, and I am their anchor in the living world. I have to find the keystone recording before they do. I have to decide whether to release a truth that could shatter our world or let it fade into silence forever. Alistair's fate is a constant reminder of the stakes. The whispers are getting stronger, and somewhere out there, in the static and the silence, the final recording is waiting. And I know I'm the only one who can make it speak. It's a tale of ambition, betrayal, and a truth so dangerous it cost 3 lives in 3 very different ways. Our story begins, not on a battlefield, but in the hallowed, silent halls of the Royal Archives, a place where history is meant to be preserved, not Our first character is Prince Alaric, the second son of a powerful king. He was known not for his sword arm, but for his sharp mind, an even sharper sense of justice. He was beloved by the people, a beacon of hope in an era often clouded by the court's political games. Alaric wasn't content with the gilded cage of royalty. He spent his time among the common folk listening to their troubles, and he was unafraid to question the heavy taxes and harsh laws imposed by his father as consul. This made him popular, but it also made him enemies in very high places, particularly with the king's chief advisor, Lord Valerius was a man who had clawed his way to the top. He saw the world as a chessboard, and people were merely pawns. Prince Alaric, with his idealism and influence, wasn't a pawn. He was a rogue king, a threat to Valerius's carefully constructed game of power. Valerius controlled the kingdom's finances, and whispers grew louder that he was lining his own pockets, siphoning funds meant for public works. Prince Alaric began his own quiet investigation, using his network of contacts to gather evidence against the chief advisor. He was getting close, dangerously close, to exposing a conspiracy that reached the very heart of the throne. One cold autumn night, the palace was shaken by tragedy. Prince Alaric was found in his chambers, lifeless. The official story, quickly circulated by the palace guard under Valerius's command, was a sudden, tragic illness. The court mourned, the king was heartbroken, and the kingdom moved on. But for some, the story didn't add up. The prince was young, healthy, and vigorous. An illness so swift and silent, it felt too convenient. The truth of that night was far more sinister. The prince wasn't ill. He was silenced, a single, expertly delivered dose of a rare poison in his nightly wine. But the assassin had not been as careful as he thought. He had been seen. This brings us to our second soul, caught in this web. Ilara, a young serving maid. Her only crime was being in the wrong place at the wrong time. Tasked with delivering a late-night meal to a neighboring chamber, she passed the prince's quarters just as a shadowy figure slipped out. She recognized him. Instantly it was one of Lord Valerius's personal guards, a man known for his silent efficiency. Their eyes met for a fleeting second, a moment of shared, terrifying understanding. Ilara knew what she saw, and the guard knew she had seen him. She fled in terror, not to the authorities she knew were controlled by Valerius, but into the anonymity of the city's sprawling slums. For weeks, Ilara lived in constant fear, moving from one rundown into another, her face hidden beneath a hood. She was a ghost, haunted by the memory of that night, But Valerius's reach was long. He couldn't afford a loose end, a witness who could unravel everything. His network of spies scoured the city. It wasn't long before Ilara was found. There was no public execution, no trial. She simply vanished. One night she was huddled in a cold alley. The next, she was gone. Her story erased from the world as if she had never existed. The witness was eliminated. With Alaric dead and Ilara gone, Valerius believed his secret was safe forever. He had accounted for everything, except for the quiet, unassuming man who chronicled the kingdom's history. Enter Elias, the royal archivist. Elias was a man of paper and ink, not swords and politics. His world was the sprawling, dusty labyrinth of the royal archives. He lived among scrolls, tomes, and records stretching back generations. He was meticulous, dedicated, and largely invisible to the powerful figures of the court. They saw him as little more than a living catalogue, a harmless scholar. But Elias had a secret passion. He didn't just file away history. He read it. He connected the dots. He saw the patterns that others missed. His life's work was a private project he called the Blood Chronicle, an unofficial history of the kingdom's darkest secrets, a record of the truths hidden between the lines of official decrees. After the prince's death, Elias felt a familiar unease. The official cause of death, sudden fever, was recorded, but it felt hollow. He began to dig. In the archives, he found procurement orders for rare herbs from a distant land, signed off by Valerius's office. Herbs known for their medicinal properties, but also for their potential as untraceable poisons when mixed correctly. It was a small clue, but it was a start. Then, a few weeks later, he noticed another anomaly. He was processing census updates when he came across the records for Alaris district. A notation from a city guard captain, a man known to be on Valerius's payroll. Marqued Heras departed. No forwarding information. It was a cold, bureaucratic term for a disappearance. Elias cross-referenced the guard's patrol logs. The same captain who filed Alaris' report had been on special duty near the slums on the very night she vanished. The pieces began to click into place. The prince who threatened the poison Valerius procured. The servant girl who disappeared after being in the wrong place. Elias saw the horrifying picture emerging from the disparate records. He had a duty to the truth, a duty he felt was more sacred than his duty to the king. Working late into the night, by the flickering light of a single candle, Elias began to document his findings. He compiled the procurement orders, the guard logs, and his own chronological analysis into a new, damning chapter of his blood chronicle. He knew the risk. This wasn't just history. It was an accusation of regicide and murder against the most powerful man in the kingdom. He made a single, secret copy, hiding it within the binding of an ancient, forgotten book of maps, a place no one would ever think to look. He planned to smuggle this evidence to a group of nobles loyal to the late prince's memory. But Elias, like the prince before him, had underestimated Valerius's paranoia. The chief advisor had spies everywhere, even among the lowly scribes of the archives. A young apprentice, eager for promotion, reported the archivist's strange, late-night activities and his unusual interest in records related to the prince's death. That was all Valerius needed to hear. He didn't need proof. Suspicion was enough. One morning, the doors to the royal archives were sealed. Royal guards stormed the quiet sanctuary of knowledge. They didn't come for a book. They came for the author. Elias was dragged from his desk, his hands stained with the very ink he had used to record the truth. He was not accused of uncovering a murder. That would be too dangerous. It would invite questions. Instead, Lord Valerius framed him for a different crime. One just as fatal. Treason. He was publicly accused of altering historical documents to undermine the king's authority. The trial was a sham. The evidence was fabricated. The witnesses were coerced. Elias, the quiet man of letters, stood no chance against the full might of the state wielded by a guilty man. He never spoke of the prince or the serving girl. He knew it was pointless. Elias had already won. Elias was condemned. But unlike the prince and the maid, his death was to be a public spectacle, a warning to any who might dare to question official narratives. He was condemned for a crime he didn't commit, but he was truly being executed for the one he did, knowing too much. As he was led to the gallows, Elias felt not despair, but a strange sense of peace. He had fulfilled his duty. He had recorded the truth. His own life was forfeit, but the story was not lost. He knew that one day, someone else with a curious mind might stumble upon that hidden chronicle within the old book of maps. He believed that ink, in the end, was more permanent than blood, and that truth, no matter how deeply buried, will always find its way to the light. And so, the story of the prince, the witness, and the archivist was complete. 3 lives extinguished by one man's ambition. A prince silenced for his integrity, a witness erased for what she saw, and a historian condemned for what he knew. Lord Valerius would go on to rule from the shadows for many more years, his power seemingly absolute. But history has a long memory. Centuries later, a new archivist, reorganizing a forgotten section of the library, would feel an unusual thickness in the binding of an old map book. A discovery that would finally bring the story of the Blood Chronicle to light, proving that Elias was right. The truth, eventually, always finds a voice. The flickering fluorescent light was the only sound in the dead quiet of the Grand Archives, a hum that seemed to sync with the tremor in my hands. I'm Dr. Elias Ward, and for the past decade, this dust-filled mausoleum of forgotten histories has been my world. I'd always believed that truth, no matter how buried, deserved to see the light of day. Primera dua, ese azul. It all started with a single, uncatalogued crate from the Blackwood Asylum. A place shuttered in the 1950s after a series of incidents. The official records were clean, sanitized, citing funding issues and outdated practices. But the whispers, the local legends, told a different story. They spoke of a final night, a cacophony of screams that suddenly fell silent, and a building abandoned as if fleeing a plague. The crate was bound in rusted iron chains, not tape. That should have been my first warning. Inside wasn't paper, but a collection of wax cylinder recordings, their brownish surfaces looking disturbingly organic. There was also a leather-bound journal, its pages brittle and stained with something dark and rust-colored. The journal belonged to a Dr. Elias Thorne, Blackwood's final superintendent. My professional curiosity, my obsession, got the better of me. I restored one of the old phonographs from the archives collection, my heart pounding a strange, erratic rhythm. The first cylinder I chose was labeled simply Patient Zero. I placed the needle on the wax, and the room filled with a hiss, then a voice. It was a woman, whispering, her words disjointed, nonsensical at first. She spoke of a door that isn't a door, and a song that unwinds the world. Her voice grew frantic, devolving into sobs, and then a chilling, guttural shriek that made the hair on my arms stand up. The recording ended abruptly. For days, I was consumed. I cross-referenced the recording with Dr. Thorne's journal. His early entries were clinical, detached. He described Patient Zero, a woman named Delara found wandering the moors with no memory. She was calm, placid, until she began to hum. Thorne Kayed. It, the dissonance. A simple, atonal melody that seemed to burrow into the listener's mind. He documented how other patients, then the staff, became agitated, paranoid, whenever she hummed it. The more I listened, the more I read, the more the archives themselves seemed to change. Shadows in my peripheral vision would stretch and twist into impossible shapes. I'd hear faint whispers echoing down the long corridors, thinking it was the old building settling. But the words were too clear. They'd call my name. Alistair. Sometimes I'd catch a whiff of ozone and decay, a smell that had no source. I started sleeping in my office, too unnerved to go home, convinced I was just overworked, that the story was getting to me. Thorne's journal entries grew more desperate. He wrote about the song. He tried to transcribe it, but the notes seemed to shift on the page. Essaiti didn't he follow any known musical scale. It was a key. He became convinced Delara wasn't sick. She was a vessel for something else, something ancient that had been sleeping and was now being woken by her song. One evening, while working late, I found another cylinder. This one unlabeled. I put it on the phonograph. It wasn't Alara's voice this time. It was Thorne's. He was panicked, breathless. He was describing the final night at Blackwood. "She's not humming anymore," he gasped, his voice tight with terror. "She's singing." The walls are bleeding shadows. The others, they're not human anymore. Their faces are wrong. They're opening the door for it. The song is the key. I have to stop the song. The recording ended with a sickening crunch and a wet, tearing sound, followed by a chorus of voices, all singing that same discordant melody. A cold dread washed over me. I had done more than just uncover a story. I had let this song out. The humming started in my own head then, a faint, insidious tune. I tried to shake it off, but it was there, just beneath my own thoughts. The archive was no longer a place of quiet solitude. It was alive. Books would fly off shelves in aisles I'd just walked down. Card catalog drawers would slide open and shut violently. The whispers were constant now, a maddening chorus. They weren't just calling my name. They were singing. They were singing Elias' song. I realized the horror of my discovery. Thorne hadn't just documented the events. He had tried to contain them. The chains on the crate, the scattered, unlabeled recordings. It was a warning. He was trying to break the sequence, to hide the key. And I, in my arrogant pursuit of truth, had put it all back together. I had retoned the instrument. My reflection in the dark glass of the microfilm readers became a stranger. My eyes looked sunken, haunted. Behind my own image, I'd see movement, a tall, slender figure made of shifting darkness, with too many joints in its limbs. It was always there, just at the edge of sight. The thing from behind the door. The thing Thorne's patience had welcomed. I tried to destroy the cylinders, to burn the journal, but it was too late. The moment I brought the hammer down on the first wax recording, a force threw me across the room. The lights in the entire archive burst in a shower of sparks, plunging me into absolute darkness. But I wasn't alone. The singing was all around me now, loud, triumphant. It was coming from every corner, every shadow, from the very bones of the building. I'm recording this now on my phone, huddled in the main reading room. The doors are sealed, not by. The metal groans and bends, as if under immense pressure from the outside. But the real danger is, and here with me, the whispers have stopped. The singing has coalesced into one booming voice that makes my teeth ache and my vision swim. The air is thick, shimmering. The shadows are no longer just shadows. They are pooling together, taking form. I can see it now, fully. It's unfolding itself in the center of the room. It's tall, impossibly thin, and it doesn't have a face, just a swirling vortex of darkness, where a face should be. It's looking at me. I can feel its gaze, a psychic pressure that threatens to crack my mind open. Dr. Thorne wasn't trying to save the truth. He was trying to bury a curse. He knew that some knowledge is a poison, that some doors, once opened, can never be closed again. The archivist's job is to preserve the past, but I've learned the terrible truth. Some things should be forgotten. Some archives were never meant to be opened. The song is reaching its crescendo. The thing is taking a step towards me. Its form is solidifying. I finally understand. Ilara wasn't patient zero. She was just the first to hear the song. I was the one who gave it a voice. I was the one who finished the key. The archive isn't just a collection of stories anymore. It's a gateway. And I've just unlocked the door. My name is Dr. Elias Ward, and I'm the last archivist. Don't come looking for the truth. For God's sake, let it lie. Let it all be forgotten. Thanks for listening to my story.